Before the police lights even faded, she promised revenge, and that promise would put her in handcuffs twice in the same week. I never thought a quiet HOA meeting could ignite a power struggle so volatile, but the woman everyone called, Karen believed authority was something you could seize by force. On a warm Tuesday evening, our neighborhood clubhouse filled with folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and nervous whispers. Karen arrived late, heels snapping like gunshots, clutching a binder labeled compliance. She announced new fines, new rules, and new surveillance, claiming the board had lost its spine. When homeowners pushed back, she smiled thinly and said she would reclaim power personally. That was the moment everything changed. By dawn the next morning, Karen had posted official-looking notices on doors, complete with forged signatures and threats of immediate penalties. She paced driveways with a clipboard, photographing trash cans and measuring hedges like evidence at a crime scene. I watched from my porch as she ordered a neighbor to remove a flag she disliked. When he refused, she dialed 911, insisting she was enforcing community law. The responding officer quickly realized she had no authority, warned her to stop, and left. Karen exploded, shouting about conspiracies and disrespect. 10 minutes later, she followed the officer's car, screaming into her phone, and blocked traffic at the entrance gate. That decision earned her first arrest. Charges were minor, but the humiliation was not. Neighbors recorded everything. By afternoon, the videos spread, and Karen was released with a citation and a warning to stay away from HOA business. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. She posted a live stream declaring the board corrupt and herself the rightful enforcer. She vowed to take back control before sunset. As night fell, she returned to the clubhouse, pried open a storage room, and removed files she claimed were evidence. When the treasurer confronted her, Karen shoved past him and tried to lock the doors. Police were called again. This time they arrived faster, calmer, and prepared. Watching from the curb, I realized power isn't taken by yelling loudest. It's lost the moment you forget the law applies to you too. Still, none of us understood how far Karen would push her fantasy. She believed titles created obedience, and fear created respect. The board's silence fed her certainty. Every glare from a neighbor felt to her like proof of destiny. She walked away that night convinced the community needed saving, and that only she was brave enough to do it. That belief, unchecked and loud, was the spark that would light the second arrest. None of us realized how fast consequences would follow her next move tonight ahead soon. The morning after her first arrest, when Karen woke up convinced the system had blinked first, instead of shame, she felt validated. She told anyone who would listen that the police had overreacted and that real authority didn't come from badges, but from confidence. By noon, she was back online, posting screenshots of HOA bylaws with highlighted sections, taken wildly out of context. She claimed emergency powers, citing clauses that didn't exist. Neighbors tried reasoning with her, but Karen interpreted concern as surrender. To her, every unanswered comment meant people were afraid. By mid-afternoon, she escalated. She emailed the entire neighborhood announcing an emergency compliance inspection scheduled for that evening. The message carried a fake HOA letterhead and warned that refusal would result in towing, fines, or law enforcement involvement. Some residents panicked. Others laughed. A few called the actual HOA president, who immediately sent out a correction telling everyone to ignore Karen and reminding her, publicly, to cease all actions. That correction was the trigger. Karen took it as a declaration of war. She drove to the gated entrance and used a temporary contractor, code she'd memorized months earlier, to enter. Once inside, she parked her SUV sideways across the main road, claiming she was conducting a security lockdown. When a delivery driver tried to pass, she stood in front of his truck filming herself, narrating how she was protecting the community. The driver called the police. Karen called them too, insisting someone was trespassing. When officers arrived, they recognized her name immediately. This time, she tried a new tactic. She spoke calmly, hands folded, reciting legal jargon she'd clearly memorized overnight. She accused the officers of bias and threatened to sue. One officer patiently explained, again, that she had no authority and was obstructing traffic. Karen refused to move her vehicle. She said arresting her would prove her point. The officer sighed, signaled his partner, and asked her to step out of the car. Her second arrest was quieter but more severe. No shouting, no spectacle, just the click of cuffs and a tow truck hauling away her SUV. Charges included obstruction, impersonating an official, and violation of a no-contact warning issued hours earlier. Neighbors watched from porches in stunned silence. Some felt relief. Others felt sadness. Karen looked straight ahead, jaw clenched. As if enduring a test she believed history would vindicate. Later that night, the board released a statement clarifying her removal from any HOA role and warning against harassment. The community exhaled, thinking it was finally over. But power struggles rarely end cleanly. Karen didn't see 2 arrests as defeat. In her mind, they were evidence she was right, that the truth was being suppressed. And when someone believes that deeply, consequences don't stop them. They only change the battlefield, opened with silence, the kind that settles after chaos and makes everyone uneasy. For a few days, Karen disappeared. Her social media went dark. The clubhouse stayed locked. Neighbors began repairing the emotional dents left behind, returning borrowed lawn tools and waving again during evening walks. Some believed the arrests had finally broken the illusion. Others sensed a storm gathering beyond the quiet, because people obsessed with power rarely vanish without planning their return. On the 4th day, envelopes appeared in mailboxes across the neighborhood. Inside each was a typed letter titled, "Notice of Restitution." Karen accused the HOA board of unlawfully stripping her authority and demanded compensation for emotional distress, lost reputation, and what she called community sabotage. She gave a deadline of 72 hours. At the bottom, she warned that failure to comply would force her to pursue justice by any means available. Letters weren't illegal, but they were unsettling. Fear crept back in. That afternoon, a process server arrived at the HOA president's house. Karen had filed a civil complaint, amendments spilling into the margins. The claims were incoherent, but filing them showed intent. She wasn't done. She wanted leverage. She wanted attention. And more than anything, she wanted control restored. The board hired an attorney and advised residents to stop engaging with her completely. Ignored, Karen grew louder. She began standing outside the gated entrance again, this time on public sidewalk property, holding a sign that read, "HOA Corruption Exposed." She live-streamed passing cars, narrating crimes and calling out neighbors by name. When one resident asked her to stop filming children, Karen laughed and said public spaces had no privacy. Police arrived twice that day but left, explaining she was technically within her rights. The breaking point came at dusk. Karen followed a board member home, continuing her live stream and shouting accusations. When the board member pulled into his driveway, Karen blocked the entrance with her body, demanding a public apology. A neighbor recorded everything and called the police. This wasn't civil anymore. It was harassment. Officers arrived to find Karen refusing commands, insisting she was performing a citizen investigation. She accused the board member of bribery and threatened to expose fabricated evidence. When officers tried to separate them, Karen resisted, pulling away and yelling about oppression. That resistance changed everything. She was taken into custody again, this time on harassment and resisting charges. Watching the patrol car leave, the neighborhood realized something painful. Karen didn't want power to serve anyone. She wanted it to validate her. And when that validation was denied, she burned every bridge to prove she mattered. The consequences were no longer symbolic. They were permanent now. It didn't begin with sirens. It began with paperwork. Court dates stacked up like bricks, each one heavier than the last. Karen sat in the front row during her arraignment, back straight, chin high, as if posture alone could restore authority. The judge read charges slowly, clearly, offering explanations and consequences. Karen interrupted twice, correcting wording, insisting intent mattered more than law. The judge warned her once. The second interruption earned a glare that silenced the room. Released on bail with strict no-contact orders, Karen interpreted boundaries as challenges. She believed restraint was weakness, and that persistence would eventually force recognition. Within hours, she drafted a manifesto styled as a community alert. It accused the HOA of fraud, the police of misconduct, and neighbors of complicity. She emailed it to local media, city council offices, and every resident she could still reach. Most ignored it. A few forwarded it to authorities. Meanwhile, the neighborhood tried to heal. Cameras were adjusted, routines restored, and meetings held with legal counsel present. The HOA formally dissolved the position Karen once held, amending bylaws to prevent unilateral enforcement. The vote was unanimous. For the first time, the community acted not out of fear, but clarity. Power, they learned, worked best when shared and defined. Karen watched these changes from the outside, feeling erased. That feeling fermented into desperation. She showed up unannounced at a mediation session she was barred from attending. When asked to leave, she refused, citing constitutional rights that didn't apply. Security escorted her out while she shouted promises of exposure. The incident was documented and added to her growing file. Days later, the judge reviewed the violations. The tone shifted. Patience thinned. Consequences hardened. Karen was remanded briefly, not for spectacle, but for compliance. Sitting alone in a holding room, reality finally pressed in. Power couldn't be reclaimed through volume or force. It required legitimacy, and that was gone. By the time she was released again, conditions were tighter, options narrower. The community moved forward without her, quieter but stronger. Karen remained convinced she was right, but righteousness without restraint had cost her credibility, freedom, and allies. The story was no longer about an HOA dispute. It was about what happens when identity becomes fused with control, and control slips away. Neighbors later reflected on warning signs they had missed, moments when intervention might have softened the outcome. Workshops were scheduled, policies clarified, and support resources shared. The lesson lingered quietly. Authority without accountability corrodes quickly. Karen's story became a cautionary tale retold at meetings, not with mockery, but resolve, reminding everyone that community survives only when power serves people. Not egos, and consequences arrive whether invited or not. Eventually, healing replaced outrage, and boundaries became shared protections everywhere. Begins months later, long after the headlines faded and the neighborhood returned to something resembling normal. The clubhouse lights clicked on for routine meetings again. Kids rode bikes without glancing over their shoulders. New flowers were planted where tension once lived. On paper, Karen's influence was gone, but the aftermath of her need for power lingered in subtler ways, shaping how everyone moved forward. Karen's final court hearing was brief. No speeches, no dramatics, just consequences. The judge issued probation, mandatory counseling, and a permanent order barring her from any HOA involvement. As the gavel fell, Karen didn't argue. She stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. For the first time, she didn't try to reclaim anything. The silence suggested exhaustion more than acceptance. Afterward, neighbors processed what had happened in their own ways. Some felt vindicated. Others felt uneasy, recognizing pieces of Karen's behavior in smaller conflicts they'd ignored before. The HOA board implemented transparency rules, rotating leadership and clear channels for grievances. Authority was no longer a vague concept someone could hijack. It was structured, visible, and accountable. Karen moved away quietly. No farewell post, no final manifeste. Just an empty driveway and a house listed for sale. Rumors circulated, but no one chased them. The community had learned that attention was fuel, and starving conflict was sometimes the strongest response. Over time, Karen became less a person and more a lesson. Looking back, the arrests weren't the real turning points. The real shift happened when people stopped reacting emotionally and started responding collectively. Karen wanted power because she believed it equaled worth. When that belief was challenged, she escalated until the law intervened. Twice. The irony was painful but clear. Power taken without consent collapses under its own weight. Today, new residents hear the story as a warning, not gossip. It's told carefully, emphasizing systems over personalities. The message is simple. Authority must be earned, boundaries must be enforced, and no one is above the rules they claim to protect. Communities don't fail because of one loud voice. They fail when everyone else stays silent. As for Karen, wherever she is now, the struggle she fought wasn't really against an HOA or neighbors. It was against losing control of how she was seen. And that battle can't be won with titles, threats, or arrests avoided or endured. It can only be resolved internally. The neighborhood didn't celebrate her downfall. It learned from it. And that learning became its true reclamation of power. Quiet, steady, and shared by everyone who chose accountability over ego, cooperation over control, and community over chaos, ensuring the story ended not with domination, but with growth for all.